In the heart of Brooklyn, under the rusted shadows of the Manhattan Bridge, lived a young woman named Emily Carter. At just 23, she had already tasted the bitter flavor of survival. Her mother had passed away when she was 10. Her father had vanished into a bottle soon after, and Emily had learned to take care of herself between low-paying shifts, scratched notebooks, and dreams almost erased. She worked as a waitress at Maggie's Diner, serving lukewarm coffee and forced smiles to customers who barely noticed her existence. Still, there was a flame inside her, a simple faith in people, a hope that resisted the misery of her days. Her tiny, damp apartment was an altar of resistance, decorated with second-hand candles and books rescued from donation boxes. Even without luxury, there was warmth there. And silence. A silence she filled with imaginary dialogues and songs only she could hear. On that rainy night, wearing a soaked coat and heavy thoughts, Emily was about to meet someone who would change her story forever. The rain sliced through the sky like needles. It was the kind of storm that made traffic lights flicker and dogs fall silent. Walking down Atlantic Avenue, clutching her backpack to her chest and stepping carefully between dirty puddles, Emily saw something that made her stop. Huddled under the awning of a closed old bookstore, a man covered himself with a filthy blanket. His eyes lowered, an unkempt beard hiding almost his entire face. There were hundreds like him on New York streets, invisible, ignored. But there was something different about this man. Maybe the book in his arms, a worn copy of Les Miserables, pages wavy from overuse. Maybe it was how he stared at the sidewalk, like someone listening to voices the world no longer hears. Without thinking much, Emily approached. "You'll freeze out here," she said, her voice firm and gentle. The man didn't answer right away. He just lifted his eyes. And there was more than misery there. There was a story. "Come with me. Just for tonight." He hesitated, then nodded. His name was James Miller. Or at least that's what he said. His hoarse voice, worn down by the cold, came out almost like a whisper. When he entered the apartment, he seemed surprised there were still people like her in the world. Emily lit 2 candles, handed him a clean towel, and served a shallow bowl of soup with dry toast. He sat at the edge of the sofa as if afraid to spoil anything, his eyes observing every detail. The books, the post-it notes on the wall, the nearly dying plant on the windowsill. "Stay as long as you need," Emily said, arranging a pillow for him. He just nodded again, not saying much. But she noticed that even in silence, he was listening to everything. His eyes followed every word, every gesture. He seemed like a man searching for something. Maybe forgiveness. Maybe a new start. She didn't ask what had happened to him, and he didn't offer details. It was a tacit pact, made of respect and silence. Over the next days, James helped with small chores, washing dishes, fixing the kitchen faucet, even sewing the zipper on Emily's jacket. He seemed to know how to do a bit of everything. When he spoke, his voice was slow, steady, like someone who had led meeting rooms or taught something important to someone else. One night, Emily found him reading an advanced economics book, a dusty volume she never managed to understand. "Where did you learn that?" she asked. "I had another life," he replied, returning to his reading. There was no victimhood in his tone, no drama. Just the cold realization that the past was a different country. And Emily, with her curious heart, began to suspect that James Miller was no ordinary man. The neighborhood started to notice. Some whispered seeing that man with elegant steps and a firm gaze helping Emily carry bags, sweeping the sidewalk, or cleaning the building steps. "Your new boyfriend?" asked Mrs. Gladys from the second floor, with a sly smile. Emily just laughed, not answering. She herself didn't know what was happening. It wasn't love yet, but there was tenderness, there was respect, and there was a mystery pulling her like a magnet. One night, while hearing the news on a neighbor's TV, James froze seeing a headline: "CEO of a major company missing for 2 years." The image was old, with shorter hair, clean-shaven face. But the face was unmistakable. It was him. It was James Miller. Yet when she asked, he denied with a half-smile. "People disappear for many reasons, Emily. Sometimes because the world stops seeing them. Other times because they choose to disappear themselves." That stayed with her. And for the first time, Emily Carter felt torn. Should she investigate? Should she ignore it? Deep down, it didn't matter. She knew she had done the right thing by taking him home. But now something much bigger was unfolding. Something that touched James's past, Emily's present, and perhaps their future. Destiny, invisible and patient, waited for the right moment to turn the page. Before we dive deeper into this unexpected journey between a girl with a fragile past and a man with a fractured name, take a second. Subscribe to this channel. Hit the bell so you never miss stories like this one, where real kindness meets hidden truths. We often pass by people without knowing what storms they've weathered. What if one act of compassion changed everything? That's what happened to Emily Carter, a woman who offered a stranger shelter, only to discover she had invited a ghost from another world into her life. Not a ghost of death, but of power, secrets, and regret. James Miller, the man she found beneath the rain, was no ordinary vagrant. And as the days unfolded, Emily began to feel it. In the silence, in the rituals, in the things he never said. Her apartment became a small stage where two lives that had no reason to meet began to slowly align like constellations after a storm. And soon, the truth would no longer be content to remain hidden. Each day, James seemed to breathe more life back into her tiny apartment, and maybe into himself. The faucet that once sputtered was now fixed. A broken table leg no longer wobbled. Even the curtains, long ignored, had been washed and rehung. Emily found herself returning from work not to an empty space, but to warmth. To jazz playing low from a dusty speaker he found in the alley and repaired. There was nothing romantic yet. No lingering touches or whispered promises. Just presence. And presence, to someone who had been abandoned so often, felt more intimate than any kiss. Still, the man she'd brought home from the street puzzled her more each day. He cooked like a professional. He read like a scholar. He listened like a therapist. "Who are you really, James Miller?" she wanted to ask. But she didn't. Not yet. Some questions require time to ripen. Until then, she collected details like a detective in secret. His preference for Ethiopian coffee, his disdain for smartphones, the way his back stiffened every time sirens echoed in the distance. She caught him once tracing shapes in the condensation on the window. Complex diagrams like flowcharts. Another time, she overheard him talking in his sleep. Shareholders, 24 hours, no acquisition. The words meant nothing to most, but to her, they hinted at a different life, one where meetings and deadlines mattered more than warmth and food. Then came the morning she found him wearing her father's old wristwatch. Not out of theft but reverence. "It was ticking," he said. "And I miss the feeling of time having weight." That moment, Emily knew he wasn't a man who had lost everything. He was a man who had walked away. And that made him even more dangerous to her peace. Things shifted when a sleek black SUV parked across the street one Friday evening. The car idled for hours with two men in dark suits staring directly at her building. Emily noticed but didn't panic. Not until she saw James frozen by the window. His face ashen. "I need to go," he said without turning around. "They've found me." He began packing the few things he owned, the blanket, the book, his shoes. But Emily stepped in front of the door. "No," she said. "Not until you tell me who's out there." There was a long pause, heavy and loaded. "I was CEO of Miller Strategic Holdings," he confessed. "Until someone inside tried to kill me. I vanished to survive." Her knees nearly buckled under the weight of that truth. The man she fed soup to had once run an empire, and now he was running from it. "Why my doorstep?" she asked, voice trembling. He looked up, his eyes glassy with something between guilt and gratitude. "Because you didn't look at me like I was broken," he said. "Because you offered help without asking for my resume. 'Cause maybe I was ready to stop hiding. It was too much. And yet not enough." Emily sat down slowly, realizing the ground beneath her life had shifted permanently. Everything she thought she knew, about herself, about safety, about kindness, had been redefined. She wasn't just a waitress anymore. She was the sole witness to a man's quiet rebirth. A man with enemies. A man with secrets that could kill. But also, a man who had looked at her as if she mattered in a way no one else ever had. And she knew then, whatever came next, she wouldn't walk away. The next morning the SUV was gone. But the echo of its presence remained. Emily called in sick for the first time in 3 years. She sat with James face to face, no distractions, no excuses. "I need the whole story," she said. And so he told her. About the boardroom betrayal. About the forged documents. The embezzlement pinned on him. The man he once called his brother. Trevor Langston, who now sat in his old chair, running the company he'd built. Emily listened, heartbreaking for the man who had become a fugitive not by guilt, but by choice. He could have fought, could have gone to the press, but he chose to disappear. "I didn't want to become like them," he said. "I just wanted to remember what it felt like to be human." And in that small kitchen between toast and tears, Emily Carter understood what it meant to save someone who didn't believe they deserved to be saved. The routine between Emily Carter and James Miller became a quiet dance, full of small gestures hiding feelings that still had no name. He would wake up before her, make coffee, leave notes with old quotes from authors she'd never read. She, in turn, started cooking better, coming home earlier, smiling more. They didn't talk about the SUV, or about the name Trevor Langston, or the lost empire. It was as if both of them knew that this moment of peace was fragile, and touching it too much would break it. Still, the long glances at the table, the shared silences by the window, and the accidental hand touches spoke louder than any declaration. And despite the fear hiding in the corners, Emily started to wonder if something stronger than pain wasn't being born right there. Something like a new beginning. One stormy night, while the world slept, James had a nightmare so violent he screamed. Emily ran to him and found him sweating, trembling, mumbling names and numbers, codes that sounded like war or business. They buried it in Zurich. I told them not to sign. He woke up in shock, eyes distant, like he didn't know where he was. Emily held him close, asked nothing. She just stayed steady. When he calmed down, he sat on the couch and looked at her like he was seeing her for the first time. "You're the only person in the whole world who hasn't asked me for anything, Emily Carter. That's terrifying." She smiled gently but firmly. "It's because I don't see you as a blank check. I see you as a man trying to live." And it was then that he cried, quietly without shame. He simply let the tears fall, washing years of silence. The next morning, James made a decision. He would tell her everything. He pulled out a box hidden in the back of the closet. Inside were documents, old contracts, torn letters, and a black and white photo of a group of executives, among them himself and Trevor Langston, with a fake smile. He showed everything to Emily, telling her how he had been brought down, betrayed, exiled without warning. He spoke of a fake audit, a forged signature, and a meeting that ended with his dismissal and his name dragged through the mud. "It wasn't just about money," he said. "It was about control. I knew too much." Emily listened in silence, absorbing every word like a journalist in front of the story of a lifetime. But her heart didn't beat for headlines. It beat for a broken man who was finally rebuilding with her. What James didn't expect was that this confession would have immediate consequences. 3 days later, returning from work, Emily found the apartment door slightly open. Inside, nothing seemed stolen, except the box of documents. Her heart raced. She ran to the diner where he sometimes waited for her. Nothing. Tried calling, but he had left his old phone at home, as always, turned off. For hours, she wandered the wet streets, calling out for him, feeling like a child lost in a maze of grown-up nightmares. When she finally found him, James was sitting at the abandoned subway station where they'd first met, head bowed, face bruised. "They found me," he said. "We can't stay there anymore." Emily held his hand tight. "Then let's go where they can't reach us." The decision came instantly. Leave New York. They took only the essentials and fled to the countryside, to a small town called Fairview, where Emily knew an elderly woman who needed help with an old inn. It was a place where time seemed to stop, where the scent of fresh bread and wood filled the mornings. There, James became a gardener, helped with repairs, and kept his anonymity. Emily, meanwhile, cleaned rooms, managed bookings, and for the first time in ages, slept without fear. It was like living inside a pastoral painting. But even in paradise, ghosts don't vanish. At night, James still stared at the horizon as if expecting to be found. And Emily, seeing him like that, knew. Sooner or later they would have to face the past, together or not. In spring, when the fields around the inn began to bloom, Emily received an anonymous letter. Inside, only one sentence. "He can't escape what he built." She showed the letter to James, who froze. "It's Trevor," he said. or someone working for him. That lit a fire inside James she had never seen before. "I'm done running, Emily," he said. "I'm not the man who slept at train stations anymore. You reminded me of that." With help from an old lawyer who still owed him favors, James compiled a dossier with all the remaining proof. But not for revenge. He wanted justice. For the truth. For himself. For her. Because sometimes rebuilding yourself means going back to where everything fell apart. But this time with your head held high. On the eve of returning to New York, Emily and James sat atop the hill behind the inn, where the whole world seemed to lie beneath them. "Are you sure?" she asked. He nodded. "I have you. That's all I need." She laughed, resting her head on his shoulder. "Then let's show the world who you are, James Miller." The wind blew hard, as if nature itself celebrated that moment. A man who once slept in cardboard now carried dignity in his eyes. A woman who once merely survived now dreamed wide awake. When they came down from the hill, the sky was clear, and the path ahead seemed lit. There were still dangers. There were still uncertainties. But above all there was hope. And with hope, even the most unlikely souls can rewrite their story. On the morning of their return, the sun rose over Fairview like a hand-painted masterpiece, casting golden light that promised hope. James Miller laced up his old black shoes, the same he'd worn to boardroom meetings when executives called him Mr. Miller. Emily Carter watched quietly from the edge of the bed, sensing an invisible shift in him. "Are you ready to face the man who stole everything from you?" she asked. James took a deep breath. For the first time, yes. With help from an old contact, they arranged a secret meeting with an investigative reporter from the New York Ledger. All James needed was to hand over the dossier that would expose Trevor Langston and reveal the truth behind his downfall. But more than that, he wanted to look that man in the eyes and prove he was still standing. More than that, he was alive. The meeting was set in a discreet cafe in Brooklyn Heights, the kind of place where nobody suspects, but everything happens. James arrived early, calm-eyed but with hands trembling slightly. At his side, the dossier sealed with a red ribbon. When Emily entered, she carried the aura of someone ready to face an army if necessary. They sat, ordered 2 black coffees and waited. 20 minutes later, Trevor Langston appeared. Arrogant, sharply dressed, his executive smile never reaching his eyes. "So you survived, James," he sneered. "And you're still hiding your guilt behind expensive cologne." James shot back firmly. The tension was electric, as if the air between them was about to explode. But this time, James was no longer the broken man. He was something else. Trevor laughed, believing he still held control. "What do you want?" "Money. Second chance. Public forgiveness." James didn't flinch. "I want you to face what you did. I want justice." He slid the envelope across the table. Trevor glanced but didn't touch it. That's when Emily spoke up. "He's not alone anymore. And he's not afraid of you." Her presence made Trevor falter for a fraction of a second. Small but visible. James smiled. "It's not about me anymore. It's about who you'll destroy next if you stay free." Outside, a newspaper photographer captured it all. Too late to back down now. The game had changed. And this time, James held the winning cards. The next morning, the headline splashed the front page. Former CEO exposes corruption and blackmail scheme. Langston's empire on the brink. Shares of Trevor Langston's holding plummeted within hours. Investigators reopened closed cases. Shareholders demanded answers. And the press swarmed the company headquarters like bees. James Miller, exposed anew to the public, received interview requests, comeback offers, and lucrative proposals. But he declined them all. "My soul is worth more than a new seat at the top," he told a journalist. Meanwhile, Emily returned to the Fairview Inn to care for the elderly woman, carrying in her heart the knowledge that she had been part of something bigger, the restoration of a man. And perhaps, just perhaps, the birth of a lifetime could never erase. With chaos unleashed, Trevor Langston struck back. He hired lawyers, released denials, and painted James as a vengeful traitor. But the documents spoke for themselves. More victims came forward, exposing old schemes, illegal contracts, forced layoffs. A house of cards began to crumble slowly before the nation's eyes. Meanwhile, James and Emily withdrew from the spotlight. They found refuge in a simple house by a lake where he fished at dawn, and she wrote letters to orphan children. "Maybe this is what heals us," she said one afternoon. "Living without expecting the world to applaud." He nodded. For the first time in years he felt whole. Not because of a victory over an enemy, but because of the peace that comes from staying true to oneself. Time passed. Months slipped by, and justice moved slowly, as it always does. Trevor Langston was indicted. The legal process crawled forward, but the damage was done. His reputation was stained. His allies silenced. His arrogance dissolved into fear. And James, once sleeping under snow, now slept beside a woman who had never abandoned him, even without knowing who he really was. At night on the porch, he counted stars with Emily, as if each represented an old version of himself he no longer needed to carry. And there, beneath the endless sky, a new chapter was written, one where power didn't come from money, but from truth. And love, oh love, came from the courage to stay when leaving was easier. After the storm of revelations, the world seemed to pause, caught between disbelief and hope. James Miller found himself walking the quiet streets of Fairview, feeling the weight of his past lighten just enough to breathe again. The town, small but resilient, welcomed him like a prodigal son, not with open arms but with knowing glances that spoke of second chances and silent forgiveness. Emily Carter remained by his side, her presence a steady anchor amid the turbulent waves of change. Together, they navigated the delicate balance between rebuilding a shattered life and guarding the fragile hope blossoming between them. The whispers of the past still echoed in every corner, but the promise of tomorrow felt more tangible, like the first light after a long, dark night. Every face in the town carried a story of endurance, and every quiet smile exchanged with James was a thread weaving him back into the fabric of the community. They moved cautiously, aware that scars, visible or not, take time to heal. Yet, with every passing day, the healing seemed less like a distant dream and more like an approaching dawn. Meanwhile, across the city, Trevor Langston wrestled with the crumbling empire he had once controlled with iron will. The courts closed in, allies vanished, and the facade of invincibility began to crack. Desperation led him to darker corners, where threats replaced negotiations and paranoia fueled every decision. Yet, even as his world unraveled, James refused to revel in the downfall of a man he once called a friend. There was a deeper battle within him, between vengeance and mercy, anger and grace. It was Emily who reminded him that true strength lay not in retaliation, but in rising above, in forgiveness that did not excuse but freed. It was a lesson hard won, but one that began to shape the man he was becoming. He remembered the nights spent frozen in fear, the endless questions without answers, and realized that power was hollow without peace. The contrast between their paths became a mirror, reflecting not only who they were but who they might yet be. The media frenzy surrounding the case intensified, turning every detail into headlines and every gesture into speculation. Reporters camped outside the modest home where James and Emily now lived, hoping to capture a glimpse of the man who defied ruin. Yet they chose silence over spectacle, finding solace in the simple rhythms of daily life. Fishing at dawn, writing letters to children in need, and sharing quiet meals under the open sky. Their story became a quiet rebellion against a world obsessed with drama, a reminder that healing often happens in the unseen moments. And while the public consumed the sensational, James and Emily nurtured something far more profound, a love forged in truth and tempered by trials. They avoided the cameras not out of fear, but out of respect for the fragile sanctuary they were building. In the soft glow of evening spent by the fire, laughter echoed like a balm, soothing wounds deeper than any headline could reveal. In the months that followed, James dedicated himself to a new purpose. With Emily's encouragement, he launched a foundation aimed at helping those betrayed by systems of power and greed. The initiative focused on restoring dignity and opportunity, reaching out to forgotten communities and giving voice to the silenced. Each success, no matter how small, was a balm for wounds that ran deep, not only in others but within himself. Through acts of service, he found redemption and a path to peace. The foundation became a living testament to the idea that even from the darkest places, light could emerge. And with every life touched, the chains of the past grew weaker, making room for hope to flourish. The work was slow, painstaking, but every letter of thanks, every child's smile, fueled the fire of renewal within him. It was a mission born from ashes, yet burning brighter than any boardroom spotlight. Their relationship, once fragile and tentative, blossomed into a partnership rooted in shared faith and resilience. Nights spent talking under the stars gave way to mornings filled with laughter and plans for the future. They dreamed of a life unburdened by secrets, where honesty was the foundation and love the guide. Yet, they both knew the shadows of history could never fully disappear. Instead, they chose to walk forward hand in hand, facing whatever came with courage and grace. James often reflected on the irony that the man who had lost everything had gained the one thing he had never truly had before: a home. Not a house, but a place where his soul could rest. In moments of quiet reflection, he traced the scars hidden beneath his sleeves, reminders not of defeat, but of battles fought and lessons learned. Together, they found strength not in perfection but in the messy, beautiful reality of healing hearts. As justice unfolded slowly, the legal battles continued, dragging on with all the sluggishness of the judicial system. Trevor Langston fought with every resource at his disposal, attempting to twist facts and silence witnesses. But the momentum was against him. The evidence was overwhelming, and public opinion had shifted decisively. His empire, built on lies and corruption, was dismantled piece by piece. Meanwhile, James focused on the future, refusing to let bitterness consume him. The scars remained, but they no longer defined him. Instead, they were marks of survival, reminders that even in brokenness, there is strength. And as the world watched, a new chapter was unfolding, not of revenge, but of restoration. It was a slow burn, a relentless march forward, proving that true victory isn't loud or flashy, but steady and sure. In that journey, James found a profound peace, one that no courtroom or headline could offer. In the quiet moments between battles, James and Emily found peace in unexpected places. A sunrise over the lake, the gentle touch of a breeze, the laughter of a child. Their journey was far from over, but they had learned that life's greatest victories were not in conquests or riches, but in the courage to begin again. Together, they faced the future not as victims of their past, but as architects of a new destiny. And as the stars twinkled above Fairview, a silent promise echoed between them, that no matter what storms came, they would weather them side by side, fueled by faith, hope, and a love stronger than any fall. Every morning was a gift, every challenge a lesson. And in that sacred space between past pain and future promise, they chose to live fully, fiercely, and with unshakable hope. The wind carried whispers through Fairview, rustling leaves like a secret only the trees dared to share. James Miller stood at the edge of the lake, the water reflecting his silhouette, fractured yet whole in its quiet strength. The foundation he had built was more than bricks and mortar. It was a beacon for those lost in the darkness of betrayal and despair. Each story of redemption, each hand lifted from the rubble, was a testament to resilience, a quiet revolution against the cruelty of power unchecked. Emily Carter joined him silently, her eyes full of faith and fierce determination. They had walked through fire and emerged with scars that told stories, not wounds that defined them. Together, they dreamed of a future where justice was not an elusive ideal, but a living, breathing reality. Meanwhile, the city's heartbeat grew frantic as the legal battles reached their climax. Trevor Langston, once a titan, now a shadow fleeing from his own deeds, faced a court that no longer bowed to his name. Every lie he told was peeled back like layers of a decayed onion, revealing the rot beneath. Prosecutors wielded evidence like swords, cutting through the darkness he had cast over so many lives. Yet, despite the public spectacle, James remained grounded, not by indifference but by an inner peace born from truth. He understood that victory in court was only part of the journey. The greater triumph lay in reclaiming his soul. Emily's hand in his was a constant reminder that love could outlast betrayal, and hope could bloom even in the harshest winters. The media frenzy persisted, but the narrative had shifted. The once sensational headlines gave way to stories of courage, restoration, and quiet heroes who dared to stand against corruption. Interviews with James Miller became platforms not for self-glorification but for raising voices that had long been silenced. He spoke of forgiveness, not as weakness, but as a choice to break chains and build bridges. In these moments, Emily watched him transform from a man defined by loss into a leader who inspired change. Their story became a tapestry woven with threads of faith, resilience, and the raw beauty of human redemption. It was a story not just of a fallen CEO, but of a man who refused to be broken. As the weeks passed, the foundation flourished, touching lives in ways both visible and unseen. Children who had once felt forgotten now found mentors and hope. Families rebuilt on trust and kindness. James poured his heart into every initiative, fueled by the knowledge that true wealth was measured not in dollars, but in lives changed. The work was exhausting, the challenges relentless, but surrender was no longer an option. With Emily by his side, every obstacle became a stepping stone toward healing. They held fast to the belief that from ashes could rise a phoenix, blazing a path of justice and mercy. Theirs was a mission born of pain but driven by an unshakable hope that could ignite the darkest nights. Their personal bond deepened, forged in the crucible of shared trials and tender moments. Evenings found them wrapped in quiet conversation, their dreams unfolding like petals in the moonlight. They planned a future far from the shadows of the past, a future where love was their strongest foundation. Yet, they did not pretend the scars were gone. Rather, they embraced them as reminders of battles survived and lessons learned. James often spoke of the paradox of strength in vulnerability, a truth he had come to cherish through the journey. Together, they became not just survivors, but architects of a new life, a life where faith and hope paved the way forward. And so, beneath the vast sky of Fairview, a story of redemption and renewal continued to unfold. The past, though painful, no longer held dominion over their hearts. Instead, it served as a backdrop against which a new narrative was written, one of courage, forgiveness, and enduring love. James Miller and Emily Carter faced the horizon hand in hand, ready for whatever storms might come, knowing that the true measure of strength was the ability to keep moving forward. With faith as their compass and hope as their anchor, they stood as living proof that even the deepest wounds could give rise to the most radiant light. The sun rose slowly over Fairview, casting golden light on a town forever changed by the quiet heroism of its people. James Miller stood at the threshold of a new chapter, one he never imagined possible when shadows ruled his life. The foundation thrived, a living monument to resilience, but it was the personal victories that filled his heart with the deepest gratitude. Emily Carter walked beside him, her smile a daily reminder that love, tested by fire, had grown unbreakable. Together, they embodied the truth that redemption is not a destination but a journey walked one courageous step at a time. The scars they bore were no longer chains but badges of honor, each telling a story of survival and hope. In every handshake, every tear wiped away, they found the meaning of grace lived in action. Meanwhile, the court's verdict came as a thunderclap, shaking the foundations of the corrupt empire Trevor Langston had built. The verdict was decisive. Justice served not only through law but through the unwavering spirit of a community that refused to be silenced. As the gavel fell, the weight of decades lifted from many shoulders. Families, workers, and dreamers who had long awaited this moment. James did not celebrate with arrogance. Instead, he chose humility, knowing that true justice was ongoing work, not a final trophy. Emily stood quietly beside him, their shared glance a silent vow to continue fighting, not for vengeance, but for the restoration of dignity. It was a moment where past wounds began to heal, where the future shimmered with possibility and peace. In the quiet aftermath, life settled into a rhythm that was both new and familiar. The foundation's work expanded, reaching neighboring towns, spreading hope like wildfire. James and Emily found joy in small victories: the laughter of children, the rebuilding of homes, the reunion of families. Their story became a beacon, inspiring countless others to believe in the power of forgiveness and the strength of second chances. Yet, they never forgot the price paid: the sleepless nights, the betrayals, the losses that had shaped them. Instead, they honored those moments by living boldly, fully, with hearts wide open to the grace that had carried them through. Every sunset was a reminder that even the darkest nights eventually give way to dawn. Their love, forged in the crucible of trials, blossomed into something unshakable. Emily's faith and strength became the bedrock on which James rebuilt his life, and together they dreamed beyond the horizon. They spoke often of the future, of children, of a legacy not measured in wealth but in kindness and courage. They understood now that true success was found not in power or prestige, but in the lives touched and the hope ignited. Their home, once a refuge, became a sanctuary of healing for others, a place where broken souls found new wings. The community rallied around them, not out of pity, but admiration for their relentless spirit and unwavering commitment to justice. Their love story was no longer a secret, but a testament to the transformative power of grace. As seasons changed, so did the people of Fairview. The town, once overshadowed by scandal and sorrow, blossomed with renewed energy and purpose. James and Emily often walked through streets now filled with laughter and light, grateful witnesses to the fruits of perseverance and faith. They spoke openly about their journey, the pain and the miracles, offering hope to those still struggling in silence. Their story rippled outward, touching hearts far beyond the town's borders, reminding the world that redemption is never beyond reach. Every smile they encountered was a victory, every embrace a balm for wounds unseen. They became living proof that even the most broken stories could be rewritten with courage and love. In their quiet moments together, away from the public eye, James and Emily reflected on how far they had come. They acknowledged the scars that remained but no longer feared them. Instead, they held them gently, like old friends who carried lessons and strength. Their faith had been tested and tempered, their spirits hardened not by bitterness but by grace. They knew that life would always carry challenges, but with hands clasped tightly and hearts open wide, they could face whatever storms lay ahead. Their story, once marked by loss and deception, was now a symphony of hope, resilience, and unyielding love. It was a testament not just to survival but to the extraordinary power of redemption. Finally, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of fire and hope, James Miller and Emily Carter stood side by side, ready for whatever tomorrow might bring. Their past was no longer a prison but a foundation, solid, unshakable, and beautiful in its imperfection. Together they faced the future with eyes wide open, hearts full, and spirits unbroken. They had learned that true strength lies not in avoiding the fall, but in rising every time with grace and courage. The world watched and learned that sometimes the richest stories are born from the humblest beginnings. And in that quiet town of Fairview, a love story ended not with a period, but with a promise: to live boldly, love deeply, and never stop believing in the power of a new dawn.